So recently I discovered the brand new Mortal Kombat 11 game specifically for the Nintendo Switch already on discount at Amazon. Believe it or not, it's already going for $49 just a couple days after release, and that's absolutely nutty for a game that just came out, I think on April 23rd. So you can see it just came out, and it's kind of weird how that game's already at $49.99, and that's what really prompted me to make this video. The reason I'm actually making this video is because I actually want to talk about the Nintendo Switch and talk about Nintendo specifically when it comes to game prices. You guys know when it comes to Nintendo systems, not just the Nintendo Switch, but when you buy a Nintendo system specifically, the Nintendo systems are always the most expensive systems to buy games for typically, because typically what happens if you're a Nintendo fan and you buy a lot of Nintendo first party titles, even third party titles, like for instance on the Switch, there are some third party titles which you would think would be super cheap by now because they're either super old ports or they're just games that are very old, but lo and behold, they're actually still very high. Like for instance, Skyrim and Doom. I looked at Skyrim and Doom for the Nintendo Switch, at least where I'm from and what I've looked at prices, they're still going for about $50 to $55 for both Doom and Skyrim. And you guys know Skyrim was a 7th generation game back on the Xbox 360 and the PS3, so you can see that game is very dirt cheap. Actually, fun fact, if you try to go out and buy Skyrim for last generation hardware, typically it sells for about $1, $2, $3, or $4 because it's just super old and you can get that so dirt cheap. You might as well buy that version if you still have a 360 or a PS3 laying around. Doom is a little bit much more of a newer game, but even so, I think it came out in 2016 and the Nintendo Switch got it a year later, and now it's 2019, so you would think that game would have came down in price, but no, it's still holding its value very well, $50 to $55 depending on where you look at, and at least in my area, it's still very expensive. So as you can see, it's not just first-party titles that are expensive on the Nintendo Switch, it's actually third-party titles as well being super expensive on the Nintendo Switch, and this has been a trend for quite some time when it comes to Nintendo systems. And like I said, not just the Nintendo Switch, whether we're talking about the Wii U, whether we're talking about the original Wii, the games just have been super expensive, and most time Nintendo won't knock off prices for their top tier games. Most of the time when you try to buy a top tier game, even if it's years after it's been released, you guys know you pay a top dollar for a lot of their games. So expensive to be a Nintendo gamer. It really does seem like it's the worst console to buy, at least in terms of value and in terms of how much money you're going to be pumping into the system from that standpoint, because it's very expensive. If you always compare it to the current gen systems that are out, the other competition, usually the Xbox and the PlayStation, you guys know games go down almost all the time, and if you're trying to buy a lot of games for say like $100 bill, you would be getting a lot of games. Yes, some of them are older games, not all of them are great games, but in general you are going to be getting more value for your money when it comes to the other systems. All you really have to do is don't buy games on release. For some reason it's been like this for quite some time. We're on those current systems, maybe because they're on every system known to man, maybe that's why these prices always goes down, but it always seems like those games are always dirt cheap for games, and you're always getting a good value for your money when it comes to the Xbox and the PlayStation. So it almost seems like those are the places to go, at least if you're trying to save money in the long run and trying to buy dirt cheap games, whereas Nintendo always keeps their prices high. Why do I think Nintendo keeps their prices high when it comes to game prices? Really, I can't really say for sure why they do this. There could be a lot of different factors to take in consideration when it comes to actual game prices and why Nintendo likes to keep their games mostly close to $60, especially when it comes to their first-party titles. They stay at $50 to $60 for most of the life cycle of that current gen system, of course, and that's absolutely going to be frustrating. I know some people out there are probably going to hate Nintendo and say, well, Nintendo's just greedy and because they just want a lot of money in the bank, of course they're going to keep their game prices high. But honestly, I'm not going to say if I agree with that or disagree with that, but I know from Nintendo, and Nintendo also knows that people are willing to buy their first party IPs, but usually when you think of Nintendo and you think of their first party IPs, the properties that Nintendo makes, usually Nintendo does make quality games. Of course, not everyone is going to be the same type of value when you pay $60, of course, but most of them are worthy of their $60 price point, and you know you are getting a quality product when it comes to Nintendo games, and most people already know that, so they're willing to pay $60, even if the games 3, 4, 5 years old, and it's still sitting close to $60. Most people are still going to be willing to pay the money because they know they're getting a top tier quality product. But here's something that's kind of brilliant right now, and that's also why I'm making this video. The one thing that's actually brilliant as of right now is if you look at the Nintendo Switch specifically, it looks like they haven't done this in quite some time. I don't know what the last console they really heavily did this, but I know with the Nintendo Switch they've been doing it much more. They've been giving out discounts to some of their top tier games. Even third-party games on the Nintendo Switch have had sales on their games. When you look at the Nintendo Switch since it first came out and you calculated how many sales a lot of their first-party IPs actually got, it's actually quite mind-blowing. Yes, it's mind-blowing to think how many of their first-party IPs have actually gone on sale. Now, none of these games have gotten a permanent discount, so you do have to look out for these sales yearly, and you have to make sure that you're checking on sales from certain retailers, checking on sales from the eShop, checking on sales, like I said, just everywhere. As long as you're looking out for these sales, you can find sales on the Nintendo Switch properties, and I really don't know why Nintendo is actually doing it. Is it because the Nintendo Switch is selling bangers, it's selling like 35 million units, or is it because, well, they have enough properties now, and since a lot of the games are also older games from the Wii U era, since they did port a lot of Wii U games over to the Nintendo Switch, is that why they're able to get away with doing a lot of these random discounts throughout the year? It just seems like Nintendo is really for the consumer, and they're really trying to go on these discounts for these games to get people to play these games. Maybe they have a lot of games on there too, that some of these games they're okay giving out a discount, and with 35 million units already sold, they're like, well, hey, there's already enough people who bought these games at full price, so we don't mind throughout the years giving out these discounts to these games. And if you look at these sales that they've had throughout the years regarding the Nintendo Switch, since the Nintendo Switch has been out, you will notice that there has been some amazing deals. I'm talking like, for instance, once there was a $40 deal on Super Mario Odyssey. Also, Breath of the Wild once was like $39. It just, you can see that for some odd reason, they're just really giving out things. It looks like we're kind of talking about a different Nintendo in this aspect, since they're heavily always giving out discounts throughout the year to their major first-party titles, and that's absolutely good news for Nintendo fans. It really looks like that they are doing kind of like a 180, because like I said before at the beginning of the video, it really did seem like throughout the years and with past consoles, specifically like the Wii or like the Wii U games, were always close to $60 for most of the life cycle of that current system. Like I remember the Wii, for instance, the Wii was one where if you tried to buy Super Mario Galaxy or Galaxy 2, for instance, it normally stayed at $60, and they never really did sales on that as far as I'm aware, and that absolutely sucked for gamers because most of the time you were going to pay $60. Yes, I agree, that game is worthy of a $60 price point, and like I said before, most of Nintendo properties are worthy of the $60 price point. But if you compare it to something like the PS4 or something like the Xbox, why should they get permanent discounts on their games or sales throughout the years on their properties? Because their properties are just as good, if not better in some cases, when it comes to video games. So why does Nintendo have to be different, and why do people who buy Nintendo consoles have to spend more money out of their pocket for the games when a lot of those games get permanent discounts or get sales throughout the years on those other consoles? It just kind of seems unfair, but I guess it's Nintendo. What can you really say? Nintendo always likes keeping their game prices high for games. I think right now, even if you go back to the original Wii, for instance, and you try to buy Mario Kart, Mario Kart Wii is still sitting at around $30, at least in my area where I checked. It could be different for different people, but $30 is still $30, and taking consideration the Wii doesn't have the online aspect anymore, it does kind of suck that you are still paying $30 for that game. That's half the price of Mario Kart 8, which has online functionality, and it's on a system you can take on the go. It just really seems that Nintendo properties stay high in price. But yes, it looks like we are talking about a brand new Nintendo here, especially with things like recently Mortal Kombat 11 going on sale 2 days after release. Who expected Mortal Kombat 11 to go on sale 2 days after release? That's actually got to be quite mind-blowing. It's already down to like $50 at least on Amazon, $49.99, and I'm sure some other retailers might have it marked down as well to $49.99. It just seems like this generation, more third parties and Nintendo are doing these discounts throughout the year. So far, we really haven't had any permanent discounts on first-party IPs from Nintendo, but at least these random sales throughout the year will make you appreciate these games and maybe make you go out and buy more games for your system that you normally wouldn't go out and buy, because there's these really fantastic deals throughout the year for a lot of these first-party IPs from Nintendo. So it really does seem like Nintendo is kind of changing their ways, at least when it comes to the Nintendo Switch. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.